Moving on to South Korea, North Korea and the US. Now, South Korea and the United States are discussing joint planning and implementation of US nuclear operations to counter the rising North Korean threat. Seoul made the announcement soon after US President Joe Biden said that there will be no joint nuclear exercises.
President Biden, are you discussing joint nuclear exercises with South Korea right now?
Biden's remarks came after South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said that the two countries are in talks to hold drills that involve nukes. And now South Korea's presidential office says that Biden had to refute the report because he was asked if the two countries were, quote-unquote, discussing nuclear war games, whereas joint nuclear exercises can only be held between nuclear weapons states. Yoon's press secretary said that the two countries are discussing ways to share information on the operation of US-owned nuclear assets in order to respond to the North Korean nuclear weapons, and are jointly planning the execution of them accordingly. Now, meanwhile, a senior US official also confirmed that the allies are looking at enhanced information sharing, joint contingency planning, and an eventual tabletop exercise. The official added that the timing of the exercises have not yet been finalized, but it's certain that it will take place in the not so distant future. Earlier, US National Security Council also said that the allies are working on an effective coordinated response to a range of scenarios, including nuclear use by North Korea. For more on this, we are being joined by Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly, who is American political analyst on inter-Korean affairs and a professor at the Department of Political Science, National University in Busan. Robert, welcome to WION.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
I'd like to start with what has caused this sudden change in stance from the US?
Yeah, well, there's been, as we know from last year, there were a lot of North Korean missile tests, right? And there were a lot of rumors that North Korea might do a seventh nuclear test as well. We're still probably anticipating that, I think, sometime this year. If the North Koreans are going to build these things together to test them, so eventually they'll probably test again. And as you might imagine, that creates fear and anxiety here in South Korea and in Japan as well, right? And it looks increasingly like the North Koreans are going to keep these things no matter what, that there really is no sort of bargaining position that would get the North Koreans to give them up or even reduce them or in some way bring them into the non-proliferation regime, things like the IAEA inspectors and things like that, right? It looks like the North Koreans have simply no interest whatsoever in any kind of arms control or limitation or anything like that. And so as a result, you're getting all this anxiety, and so there's a discussion in South Korea about building nuclear weapons and stuff like that. The Americans are concerned about this, and so increasingly, a nuclear North Korea has got to figure into the planning.
Robert, is this the approach US will take going forward, in a way playing North Korea's game of being ambiguous while being a constant threat?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think the Americans are now going to have to plan around a North Korean nuclear contingency. So yes, I think that what was said in the last day or two about sort of like nuclear planning, that's going to have to take place now, because it's pretty likely that North Korea would use nuclear weapons in any kind of Korean contingency. Even if they didn't actually launch the very large weapons they have at the United States or Japan or something, they might use smaller battlefield nuclear weapons against U.S. and South Korean forces, right? So it looks like, because North Korea is really nuked up. It's not just its strategic deterrent, but also its ground forces for conventional conflict. They're putting nukes out through the entire military, and so therefore we have to plan around that. So yes, this is the future.
Nuclear drills at North Korea's doorstep. I mean, do you feel this will help diffuse the situation, or is intimidation the best way to tackle a trigger-happy North Korea?
I think this is better framed as deterrence. I don't actually think the United States intends to strike North Korea first. I mean, if we were going to do that, we would have done it decades ago. I don't think South Korea wants to do that either. I think South Korea really just, more than anything else, wants North Korea to go away, right? They're looking for a deal to sort of rein North Korea in and then sort of forget about it so they can do other things. I don't actually think that the United States is also threatening to sort of put nuclear weapons into the American use of nuclear weapons into the drills, right? I mean, I think that's pretty clear from the comments, right? For exactly the reason you're talking about, right? We're trying not to sort of create the perception that we're threatening North Korea with nuclear weapons. But I mean, again, ultimately, it's very likely the North Koreans would use nuclear weapons in any kind of conflict because that's really where they're going. That's where their one major advantage, their one major military advantage, because their conventional military is pretty old and out of date. And so if they're going to use nuclear weapons, then we have to start to plan around that. I mean, I teach that where I work. I mean, I talk to my students about like what to do if the city that I live in gets hit by a nuclear weapon because we have the big port here. I mean, this is a real live issue, and we've got to plan around it. And there's just no option at this point.
Thank you for all those updates, Robert. We'll be in touch for more updates because this area is clearly staying pretty hot.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.